Good afternoon, friends. Today is Thursday, July 30th, a beautiful summer day, and uh, once again, I'm about 24 hours late on this reflection. So we're reflecting actually on yesterday's feast, which is too good to pass up, the Feast of Saint Martha, uh, with just a few reflections, a few thoughts. Given her place in our canon of scriptures and in our tradition. Here's the gospel from St. Luke that we're well familiar with. Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat beside the Lord at his feet listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." So our normal read and interpretation of this gospel is that Martha and Mary present us with the two faces of ministerial activity, being a disciple and being a missionary, communion with God and with one another, and response to human need, the corresponding aims of any Christian life. So if anything, the gospel calls us to that kind of simple, unfussy Christian life, discipleship and being a missionary, listening to God, listening to Jesus, being with Jesus, and responding to human need, two sisters, if you will, of the Christian life. But it remains the fact that, Martha gets something of a bum rap here. It seems that contemplation is held above service, when we know that service can't be overlooked, and especially in this context when we think of homemaking and caregiving. So many heroic women, our own mothers and grandmothers included, who really had no choice to sit down and be contemplative, because they were consistently about the work of taking care of a home, of keeping us together. And so I think that this gospel has always been just a little pinprick of, like, ouch, for so many, especially women who have to work hard about the house. And I'm thinking especially of these days, with as we look ahead to this coming school year, for example, and those of us with some leadership responsibility making systemic decisions for what that's going to look like, whether it's in person or at home, distance, remote, whatever the combination is, hybrid as we call it. but can multiply that by, in our Extension Academy, by 500 households or whatever it is, and multiply that by every household that has a child, and recognize for so many of you, recognize the complications that parents, mothers, working parents have to face in holding it all together, managing a house, on top of everything, on top of all the other expectations of making a living and having a career and all of that. It seems to me that a better read of this gospel, and perhaps pretty obvious to some of you, is not that the Lord is in any way undermining that kind of service, but is calling attention to the fretting, to the anxiety that all of us are prone to, especially in these days. Who is not distracted and anxious these days because of COVID, because of the unrest in society, because of the violence that we're experiencing in our city? Thomas Merton says this relative to life in the 60s, the 1960s. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything, is itself to succumb to the violence of our times. So there's violence, he calls it violence, even being done to us by the violence. That is to say that we are being upset, overturned, undone by all the needs that are being placed before us, good things that we want to respond to, a result of the violence of our times. But in any case, the anxiety and distraction that Jesus points to in Martha can be a good lesson for us, that when we experience that, and as I said, most of us are experiencing it to a greater degree these days than perhaps we have in the past. It's that moment again to turn and to look at Jesus, to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Martha later in the Gospels, that is in the Gospel of St. John, when Jesus visits the tomb of Lazarus, Martha makes that great confession of faith: "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." She does come to recognize that he is the answer to all things, even in the face of death. So when anxiety is getting the better of us, that's the moment to take the deep breath, to inhale, and to remember that the Lord Jesus, the risen Lord, is with us. That's Jesus' point, right? That we can, perhaps we don't have the opportunity to sit at his feet and contemplate him at length, but we do have the opportunity to take a breath, to inhale, and to recognize that he's with us, in that not even death will win. That's the lesson of Martha and Mary today. There's a great Richard Rohr brings up this little example of, well, in Martha taming the beast of that anxiety. Great iconography in the Middle Ages of Martha taming the dragon. You know, St. George, we know the images of St. George and St. Michael, you know, killing the dragon, slaying the dragon. But in images of Martha with a dragon, Martha can be found taming it, feeding it, petting it. You know, if you will, a much more feminine response to evil than taking up the sword and trying to slay it or to kill it. Rohr says you can't kill the dragon anyhow. That's just an illusion. The best you can do is tame it. You know, come to learn what the dragon has to teach you. And so with anxiety, if that's our beast, if that's our dragon, if that's the violence being done to us these days, then this gospel is a call to, with Jesus, to help tame it, even if for a moment. Martha's our patron, our model, our friend today in facing whatever anxieties are pressing on us. So I'd like to close with a great prayer of Saint Teresa of Avila. Let nothing disturb thee, nothing affright thee. All things are passing. God never changeth. Patient endurance attaineth to all things. Who God possesses, in nothing is wanting. Alone God suffices. Thanks for your attention today. God